Okay, you should be set to begin.
Good evening. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment, but they do have to log in to access the meeting. And this will not be televised, but will be recorded and posted later. I will just go through and confirm member access. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Jason Bridges.
Here.
I don't see Matt. It's not on yet. Okay, I'll go through staff members who are present. Rachel Day. You say town committee 3.
I'm going to rename myself after I was making sure everybody else was.
Janet Schulte.
I'm here.
William Pittman.
Here.
Rick Sears.
Here.
Greg Tivnan.
Here.
Brian Turbot.
Present.
Rob McNeil.
Here.
Stephen Murphy. And maybe Steve's not there. Libby Gibson.
Here.
Thank you. And Julia Novak. And Catherine Carter.
Hi.
And I think that that's enough of an opening. If I can turn it over to Julia. We also do have one attendee, Mary Longacre.
Libby, did you want to say anything before I jump in?
Oh, sure. So there's a lot of information in your packet. And just to refresh our memories about this, the development of a municipal facilities plan is a goal of the board's strategic plan under the focus area of efficient town operations. Last January, February, we started to have a discussion about how to develop the municipal facilities plan. And at that time, the board agreed that it wanted to engage a facilitator, or at least look at engaging a facilitator to help with the development of the plan. So we were in the process of doing that when COVID hit, and it got dropped and recently picked up. And we have Julia with us. Julia, Janet, Rachel, Greg, and myself have met a couple of times to go over the format of this meeting. And again, there is a lot of information in your packet. The town, various boards, actually, select boards, have been talking about municipal facilities for a long time. And I guess maybe one sort of recent thing was in 2010, we had engaged an architecture firm to look at consolidation of offices here at 16 Broad Street. And they came up with a number of options as to how to do that. And it didn't get too far because between the finance committee and the board, it was decided that everyone wanted to see a comprehensive municipal facilities plan. And ever since then, we've been trying to put a comprehensive master facilities plan together. Not to be confused with a master facilities maintenance plan. I'm saying master in the wrong place. Facilities master plan and the facilities maintenance plan, totally different. But we're hoping to progress the discussion about the facilities master plan. Where should the facilities be located, that sort of thing. So Julia has a format to impose, I guess I would say, or put forward to try to get us a little farther on this. And we are thinking that this may require more than one workshop. So
Okay.
over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much. So, as Libby said, what we want to try to do is begin understanding the direction of the select board so that the staff can start kind of moving some boxes around and figure out what will work. And so tonight is your opportunity to begin to share your thinking about how you imagine the town's municipal facilities in the future. Because there are so many pieces of property and there are so many different types of property that the town owns, we decided to kind of split the conversations into three very distinct parts. Municipal offices, so town and county functions, employee housing, and then the public amenities, the community centers and our island home and things like that. So tonight's conversation, we want you to focus on the municipal offices. And I had this brilliant idea when we were talking about this, that we would send you a map and you would draw right on the map what you wanted. And that did not work out very well. And then I imagine we would share each of your maps during this meeting tonight, and you could speak to your map. But the map thing didn't seem to work for any of you. So, oh well, we'll pivot and do something different because that's what we do in 2020. So I think what will make sense tonight is to have each member of the board go through kind of the existing places where there are municipal functions. So those locations. And what we have in the background is some slides that show the functions that are there today. So for example, what is at 16 Broad Street today? And we're going to have, as you all talk, we're going to ask you to go through the addresses. So at 16 Broad, tell us what you imagine will be there in the future. At 20 South Water, at 3 East Chestnut, etc. So we'll kind of go down the list of locations. And I think that'll actually align pretty well with how you all each did this exercise independently. And of course, some of you also shared some kind of bigger picture concepts about how you imagine energy efficiency and public access and other goals that you are hoping, beautiful lasting structures that we'll be proud of for hundreds of years, things like that. So I want you to have that opportunity to share those higher arching thoughts as well. We will be listening and taking notes, and I know the staff that is here to support you is also very interested in hearing your thoughts for the future. And we're going to be asking a small group of staff people to take and synthesize the information from tonight and say, okay, based on what we heard, this is what we think the board is saying, and we will bring that back to you to affirm. So not to adopt it, but to just say, in general, yes, this is the direction that the body wants to go for each of these buildings. And just based on what you've submitted so far that I heard from a few of you, I know you're not all on the same page exactly what your vision is for each property. I also don't think you're that far off. And so I hope you'll listen to one another tonight. And as you listen to each person, then we'll have an opportunity for some conversation at the end. And it could be that one of your colleagues has had a brilliant idea that you're interested in hearing more about, and you want them to, maybe that sways your opinion about how a certain address, I'll just call them addresses for now, might be used. So any questions about what we'll be asking you to do this evening? And maybe we'll go to the slide with the list. So, oh, look, there's the map that you all got. And here's the list of all the locations. So any questions about what I'm asking you to do? You can hardly wait, right? All right. So again, if you would go facility by facility as you talk, it will help give the big picture stuff at the beginning, but hit each facility so that as we're taking some notes, we have them pretty well organized and understand, we'll get a feel for what people are talking about at different locations. Who would like to begin? I can just call on people or ask Dawn to, since she's the chair. She can call on people.
Do you want me to kind of ramble through what I sent you in my email? But not talk about the pieces that are not town office related?
That would be
Okay.
great. Thank
Okay.
you.
I mean, what I've envisioned for a while is having a big building out at Two Fairgrounds that houses a lot of the town services, but not all of them. Where there could be a lot less of people having to go back and forth traversing to all of the different offices. Keeping all of the plus services there, they're very auto dependent as well. Putting Board of Health there and Natural Resources, except for the hatchery, which would obviously stay where it is, and moving some of the main town functions like finance and town administration out into this new facility. But while keeping a pretty significant presence downtown with the town clerk, the RMV, the Registry of Deeds that so many of the attorneys' offices in town use, the courthouse, and visitor services. And I actually didn't mention this before, but there's been talk about maybe bringing in, maybe even partnering with the chamber to have office space right by visitor services, and keeping the sheriff's office there. And I do vision that the NRTA stays in town, but it ends up moving into whatever transportation hub we hopefully create between Harbor Place and Greenhound in the future. And then in terms of offices, I don't have my email handy.
If you, and I don't know if you have in your head or the memo that I had sent with the list of functions that are in each facility. So if I just kind of hit each one and tell you what there, you can say, oh, I would imagine this would stay. So like at 16 Broad, I heard you say that you would imagine the town clerk, the Registry of Deeds, and the RMV would stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of these other things are moving to Two Fairgrounds.
Yeah. Oh, so I missed HR and like the real estate specialist and the housing specialist. I would envision all of those in the larger building at Fairgrounds Road. And what I envision for finance moving is that then we can get 37 and 39 Washington Street removed, and we can fix that parking lot into a much bigger and better parking area, and the harbor master would stay there in her new building.
Okay, so at 37 and 39 Washington, you're saying or 34,
37 and 39. One is a house where we house lifeguards,
so
and one is the finance building.
remove those completely and expand the parking lot. Okay,
That's where I'm approaching it from.
yeah, great. I'm looking at the other facilities, or the other addresses, just because, so now 3 East Chestnut is all, public health is all moving, visitor services stays. You've already talked about the Washington Street. You've talked about your vision for 2 Fairgrounds. Obviously 4 Fairgrounds currently is the public safety facility.
I don't see any change to that.
No change to that, okay.
So, I mean, there may be more expansion of parking in that whole area, but.
All right.
And I don't see the DPW moving, but we have talked at times about whether there could be a move closer to the airport on some of that property, but
Okay, Connecticut.
that's
Okay.
a very different endeavor.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have most of that. So if we need clarification, Don, we'll come back at the end. We're going to show you all kind of where we are, but location by location, but we've got that. So Don set a great kind of pace and model of what we're asking from each of you. So given that, who would like to go next? Christy, thank you.
Thanks. So I actually really like Don's idea, but I'll just say what I had written down was I had envisioned kind of expanding the 16 Broad Street, whether that was connecting with 20 South Water or 3 East Chestnut, but making sure that finance is in with town administration. I would have kept the town clerk, registry of deeds, and RMV and courts all at 16 Broad as well. I would move the housing office to be with Plus. Thought that made more sense. And then what else did I have? I have a lot of things staying. Yeah, finance department moving closer to town admin, and things like payroll being closer to HR. A sustainability office being added to the Plus and energy departments. And wondering if IT should be moved. When I did all this, I kind of was looking at who's working together and what makes most sense to be close together. So I was thinking IT might be better close to town admin or Plus, but if that opened up space at 4FG, maybe that could be the health department or board of health, trying to get health closer to fire and safety and really have a public safety department. And then I know the natural resources department is moving, so trying to envision what we might do with that location at Jetty's Beach, if it would be another concession stand, or if it would be some sort of rented use from the Nantucket Community School, or what that might be. I was also interested in kind of now post-COVID, what will working from home look like in the future? Are there certain positions or departments that can be remote, and what type of office space need is there? And also, what is the future needs of meeting spaces? And then once we kind of lay out all of that, trying to figure out where employee housing might be located and making sure that it's close to those facilities. That's what I wrote down.
What I hear you talking about, Christy, was really kind of moving functions around to make sense based on kind of adjacencies, who's working with who. Not necessarily hearing talk about a large new facility to put everyone together, but really just making the most of what you have.
Yeah, I think what I had gone on was like kind of the step one of what would make sense to have different departments moving together as we would move towards something that Dawn mentioned, because I think that is kind of something that we've talked about as a board. The Town Government Study Committee talked about moving departments out of town and kind of what that would look like with our charter. So I think if that was the long-term goal, some of these moves might be shorter-term goals.
Okay, so you do align with that kind of longer-term goal of having everybody together, but in the short term, you see a need to make some moves just to create efficiencies and make it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we've got a pretty good feel for that. Thank you very much. And let's see, who'd like to go next?
It's Melissa. I've got my hand raised. I'm not sure if you can see me or not.
Well, since I'm not a host, I can't see your hand, but I saw you do. You're awesome.
Okay. I really like both the thinking of Dawn and Christy. I feel like I'm fairly aligned with both of those. I do sort of focus on the town building block, Broad Street, South Water, East Chestnut, and Federal. And I have, I think, long been a supporter of converting the former police station into some kind of renovated visitors services space. I will disclose I am the current interim president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. But I think before I took that position, in fact, when I was the culture and tourism director, I really loved the idea of collaborating with some kind of visitors, revamped visitor service space that maybe even has some kind of collaborative effort with the NHA or other nonprofits to really create a vibrant and welcome to Nantucket space. And that above that would be offices and perhaps even some community use space for meetings in town. We really don't have community space in town aside from rented space at other nonprofits like the NHA or the Athenaeum. So it might be really nice to be able to hold some meetings downtown in those spaces. I know that our meeting spaces at the town building are often used when it's not COVID for administrative meetings and the such. And I really do think that I love the, sort of two-step process. I think that there's the longer term vision of how to move things together, but we are going to have to take it in steps and pace ourselves in terms of capital improvements before we get to the long-term goal of housing some things. And I really like what Christy said about trying to keep like services grouped in similar office environments if possible. But my biggest thing is that block in town, it feels incredibly, we know the buildings are incredibly outdated. And we know that if we had the opportunity to revision the use of those, there's a lot of potential and community use, which I also think supports our, I don't know if this is necessarily a commitment of the board or the community, but our wish of, keeping downtown Nantucket vibrant and healthy year round. And I think that's a concern of some constituents, is if we move offices out of town, will we stop creating reason for people to go into town in the off season? And so I want to be really thoughtful about what resources are left in town so that we continue to have vibrancy and traffic, and our coffee shops and our lunch spots are being used, especially in the off season. Those are all my thoughts.
So Melissa, I heard you say you kind of see this two-step process like Christy does, where you make some interim moves now to put functions together that are similar. But in the long term, you imagine this two fairgrounds, kind of a bigger facility. I think one of the new things that you mentioned that I hadn't heard before was taking the, I guess it's 20 South Water Street and possibly turning that into the Visitor Services Center and perhaps a partnership with the chamber there. And I'm trying to go down the addresses again, just to make sure we capture things in terms of notes. What were you imagining with the Washington Street, buildings?
I didn't mention Washington Street.
Okay, would you like to tell us what you imagined there?
I don't think that I have a different thought than what's already been talked about, which is why I didn't.
And if I could just clarify, when you were talking about the Visitor Service Center partnership, was that in relation to the South Water Street address, or was that in relation to the East Chestnut Street address?
No, my vision would be that the Visitor Service Center would be moved from East Chestnut Street, and you would renovate and utilize that building at South Water Street. And whether that happens in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce or it's just an independent town initiative to expand the footprint a bit of visitor services and what it can offer to visitors upon arrival. I think it's a really unique situation where you could get creative and have some interactive displays, interactive maps. And if there was an opportunity to work with the Chamber of Commerce on something like that, fabulous. If not, if it gets too complicated, I don't want to make that a sticking point of this idea, but I think that it's a really wonderful place. It's a natural place that you would walk to from either the steamship, or you could get to easily from the High Line. And just visiting other visitor service centers in, international, world-renowned resort communities, there's an opportunity for us to improve what we present to our visitors there. And at the same time, I think also improve what we offer to our year-round community in terms of resources in that space. I can see some conference rooms, maybe rooms for classes to be held, or, you know, there's a lot of creative use in that building. Maybe even some rented workspace, or, you know, I don't know exactly how it can all work, but I love that. I've loved that building for a long time as a wonderful welcome to visitors when they get here.
Okay.
Thanks, Melissa.
Mhm.
All right, Jason and Matt. Jason, you're up.
I like what everybody said so far. So it's not going to be too far off of that, but I'll put these into blocks. So 16 Broad, 20 South Water, 3 East Chestnut, 25 Federal. That should all be thought of as kind of one entity and how it all works together. Some assumptions that I have overall before I get into the specifics is that town admin, finance, and HR need to be together. I think that is the best combination for town administration to function efficiently. They need to be together, whether it's 2 Fairgrounds Road, 16 Broad, wherever. Those 3 really shouldn't be apart. It's kind of weird to say. I've always felt that way. Now with COVID, you're like, well, we can kind of be remote all the time. So that's one of my assumptions. So for 16 Broad, I do think that, you know, keeping the entire second floor should be for the courts. These are a lot of specific reasons, but I've had friends that have, you know, family court, family issues, and they have to sit right next to the people they're divorcing. Or there's nowhere for people to go when there's a child abuse issue and you got to be around their parent, the people you don't want to be around. There's no room up there for domestic violence cases, nothing. That all that should be, the R&V should be out of there. And so I think the R&V should come downstairs, and then HR and town admin go out to 2 Fairgrounds Road, along with all of finance. And 34 and 37 Washington Street are gone. Those need to be parking lots, parks, something, right? So those are gone. And then something is built at 2 Fairgrounds Road that can house the, you know, the majority of our town offices. So I'm going to jump around here, Julia, sorry. So 16 Broad, I think R&V should come downstairs, keep town clerk, keep the registry of deeds. Everybody has more room to function. And in a non-COVID world, people would be more happy to have better functioning R&V. And everybody needs more space. Town clerk, you know, the deeds, they all need more space. So there's that. 20 South Water. I love Melissa's idea of taking visitor services and putting the entrance and the face and the facade on South Water Street, and reusing those doors, those beautiful round doors, the police station, right? And getting an HDC approved, but like that's the face of visitor service. Like, welcome, come here. And there's all that space for people to park. I think that could be really well done. And the rest, I think people much smarter than me could figure out: community space, offices, whatever else we need to go there. So moving out, before I go back to 2 Fairgrounds Road, it's not on here because we don't own the property, but I think the Greenhound space and Harbor View needs to be in this plan. I think, you know, the NERDA office needs to get out of that hellhole that they're in right now and needs to be somewhere in the Greenhound property and use that as a transportation hub. So that needs to be figured into the overall plan. And then moving out to 2 Fairgrounds Road, like 4 Fairgrounds is great. Public safety is together. What a great move that a lot of people, you know, figured out a long time ago and implemented. But 2 Fairgrounds Road, I know it's going to be a hard sell to people, but that's where I think, you know, the majority of our municipal functions should go. It's the most in and out. And I think about, you know, where people need to go in and kind of get something quick, that should be kind of in Mid-Island. It's easier. It would add more traffic there, but we'd still keep things downtown to keep those, well, what Melissa said, keep the businesses going. 131 Pleasant Street, in my vision, I don't see any municipal offices there. I see that being housing. I see it being workshops for the school where that can actually a really nice facility where they offer students things that we already have, shop, electrical, carpentry, those type of things. More of a professional. What am I looking for? Give me the terms here.
Vocational.
Vocational.
Location.
Yeah,
Vocational.
vocational, but a really nice program, right? I mean, that would be amazing. The kids could walk there. Mostly probably be older kids that could walk. So something like that, but I don't see municipal offices being there. It could be that in housing, something creative. I feel like that's the really good flex space. And then 188 Matticat Road, the dump. If there's a way we can get that out, I'm on the Matt Fee bandwagon here, getting that out to the airport, and then keeping our space out at the current dump site for all the other things that we need: sandbanks, storage, whatnot. I think that's about everything.
Okay. And Jason, some people have talked about this very specifically as kind of a two-step process. What's your thinking in that regard? Do we make some interim moves and get people together, or go out, put the plan together for what will be the big building at 2 Fairgrounds, put it to the voters, and then make the moves?
And that'd be the easiest way to do it, just to be able to get that approved, and then that gets built, and then all the other pieces can, be addressed.
Okay.
That's the hardest. What's that?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because some people have said 2 steps, some people have said 1. So
I think even if we did that, if the voters even allowed us to do that and create something there that could be easier for them and could allow people to function better and be flexible, then that we need to design all these buildings for something that we don't know in 50, 60, 70 years. And so how do we create that flexible space? Because we don't know where things are going to go or what office we're going to need. Nobody thought 20 years ago we'd have a sustainability office or a DEI office. What are the next 2 things that we don't know about, we haven't thought of? So I know it always happens, right? We create spaces and it's a lot of money. So we move it down, we take away training space from the fire department. We take away this. It needs to be built bigger than what we need for, so we can grow into it. I know it's a hard sell.
all right.
And I think IT can kind of go anywhere. I mean, I think IT is always moving, helping. I don't think they have to be. I don't think it's kind of like it's not as important as having admin, HR, and finance working together and having access to each other when they need it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Matt. You're still muted, Matt.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right, there we go. I agree with a lot of what's been said. Yeah, I think, sort of I'll answer the first questions that you asked first. I think costs matter. The fewer buildings we do, consolidate, don't waste money on short-term temporary moves or renovating in low-lying areas. I think, it's very expensive to do this now. So let's phase it and do it right. Yes, on the energy efficiency, solar panels should be on all south-facing roofs. We should just build it, plan it in. And I'm saying that I've done it to a couple of my properties, and it's amazing to get no bill and a check back from National Grid. You quickly forget the $17,000 or $20,000 to put the array up on the roof when you're getting money back every month, and the payback is 3 years, 5 years, and it's going as tracked. So I think it's really important that we do that. I was the one that wrote construct buildings we can be proud of. I'm saying that because you look at the old buildings we have done, Academy Hill or some of the older ones, they were built great. And some of the newer ones don't last. And when you ask questions to the guys who are building them, they say, well, we wanted a 100-year building. Well, you should have used the stainless screws. You should have used stainless nails. I'm like, well, why didn't we do that to begin with? So when we're doing it, we should be specking these buildings to last. We need to keep a presence downtown. deeds and the court, so the lawyers remain in town. Other uses, agree with everybody else, parking commission, NRTA, visitor services, town clerk should all remain downtown. The question of whether the citizens will embrace it, if the plan is well thought out and we have the costs and we explain how it's going to happen, I think they will embrace it. I think I'm old enough to remember 20 years ago when the goal was we can't move anything out, but then we did move planning and plus out, which was really 3/4 of the business anyhow. So we've already, the damage is done. I think we can, move forward. I think people have changed. You asked about sea level rise, and yes, we should absolutely take that into consideration. Coastal Resiliency met with a professor from Hawaii Friday ago, and he is saying that we should be planning the NOAA high plus 3 feet. So, by year 2100, we're looking at 9 to 12 feet. So I think that we absolutely have to be thinking that way, or we're wasting our money. And I look at 2 fairgrounds. I look at moving a lot of the business, a lot of the building, a lot of the uses there, like Jason was saying. I think that, and we'll get to that, but I think that a big building, but it should be on the corner. It should be a focal building that we're proud of. I think the police department, and I'll go through my list now. Fire and police stay where they are. Zero Easton stays propagation. DPW should be moving to industrial land by the airport. And that's where the buildings for their vehicles and their operations and carpentry, all that should be there. The current Matticat area is in the storm surge projections, some of those areas. And so I think we should be figuring out our sequencing to build the buildings on high ground, to run I know it can't be an incinerator, but an incinerator or some other project. Otherwise, 50 years from now, we're going to be hard armoring the garbage that's there. So I think we should be thinking about it long term and saying, how do we actually really dig that up, get energy from it, and leave that area sort of pristine when the flooding starts. It's going to go right through from one side of the island to the other. 113 Pleasant Street should be a affordable housing project. Maybe some of the things Jason's talking about, but that's not, I see that as more valuable, setting the right tone there. The 2 Bathing Beach Road, I wouldn't dump a ton of money in. I'd make that seasonal tennis only, or maybe it's tennis and summertime programs for community school or something. 34 Washington, I would say lifeguards, harbor master, town pier. I'm not sure I'd move the buildings, as some people would say. I think the amount of parking we're going to get by moving them is insubstantial when we're adding 200 cars a year. Every house we build is 2-point-something cars, 2.3 parked somewhere. We're going to eat if we, so we have to really get that in line. Island Home, I would say move that to Sherman Commons, repurpose 1 East Creek Road for senior center or land bank and coastal resiliency purposes, but it should still be used. 16 Broad and 3 East Chestnut is similar to what everyone else was saying. The only differences I have is NRTA's there unless they're housed in a new transportation center. I think that what else do I have that's different? I think we should save the front part for the fire department and the, to have an in-town, and the police to have an in-town presence. I think the parking should be there. I think we should have a parking commission. We should have the parking people that are doing that should be housed there. And I think, if we continue to have more gridlock after we get through COVID, which I think we will, then I think an ambulance and a seasonal fire truck will be needed down there. So I think we should be building, adding on. We have some plans from previous years that showed large buildings, trying to keep everything down there. I'm not sure it needs to be as large as those, but I do think we need to, sort of do, upgrade that entire block as others have talked about. it should also include downtown meeting spaces. I think that's important. Let's see, two fairgrounds should have, again, it's a focal building on the corner. We should be thinking about doing 2 or 3 floors in the cellar. So, that's the cheapest space to build. We should go down 2 or 3 floors there, even open just one, but have those options eventually for storage and other uses. I have property right out there and it's bone dry in that area, so it would be easy to do. I think I look at it like the regulatory and the building enforcement should all be there. I see this as an opportunity to bring our planning function and our town administration together. Right now, I don't think that they're very united, and I think this would be a great opportunity to get them united. So that would be one of the goals, and I think the public, would be pleased to see us do that. And then Park and Rec and the community school, I know we've talked about different things there. I could see them sharing space in the new DPW buildings. They're kind of under that umbrella now, or maybe they're in a new field house at the youth fields. I'm not sure exactly, but I think that needs its own space. And let me see.
I want to clarify just a couple of things I heard, and if you haven't finished, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to
That's
interrupt.
all right.
When you were talking about a fire police presence in the downtown, especially during the season, once everyone else has moved out, what building are you talking about for that?
I'm thinking existing old police station has a couple
Okay, so 20
couple
South-
bays right there. If we need to park, and we kind of do it now, sometimes they'll park on the space there. They'll park at least an ambulance. They don't bring a fire truck, but at some point, I think that we should be thinking of keeping that option because we're going to be in gridlock.
And so a couple of people have talked about 20 South Water as visitor services, maybe the chamber. So, and having community use there. So you have a little bit different vision. And again, we're not trying to come to a consensus necessarily tonight, but I just want to make sure I'm hearing things correctly, you did not speak to visitor services really. You
Well,
mentioned.
I think I would upgrade so that visitor services has, the space they need. On that, I even think we could have a town retail store attached to visitor services and sell town signs and, and T-shirts and other knickknacks that there. I mean, I think so anyway, I had that on my list.
Okay.
And I think we could do, if we sort of, the brick building itself stays, but that we've had plans where we were connecting the existing town building to that building, or we were building the whole block. I think we should resurrect a couple of those and find a way to put meeting space. And there should be meeting rooms downtown at the new building at 2 Fairgrounds and, and in the existing, police station. It should be something we're not looking for.
Super. Anything else on your list, Matt? All right.
I think that's most of it.
All right. So we kind of have this by facility, by address, current uses, and then what we heard. And we can run through that, but I want to check in with Libby and Greg and Rachel, who will kind of shepherd this going forward. First, to see if you had any questions or if you want us to run through the notes we've taken by location first.
I would like to hear the notes by location. I'm trying to take some of my own notes, and I see some areas where we're going to need to gain some consensus.
Yes. Okay, great. So let's do that then.
Matt, hang on, before we do that, can we hear from the administration, for Libby? What do they think? Is that appropriate?
If you all want to hear from us, I'm sure that we could speak about it. We ourselves don't have a specific plan. I think our plan, we probably each have our own individual thoughts about where offices should be located. What we're, I think, trying to do is suss out what the general concepts are here with the board. Like, do you want offices consolidated? I'm hearing yes. For the areas where offices would be leaving from to go be consolidated elsewhere, what would you envision for those locations? And that's where I'm hearing some differing concepts and thoughts. So, I mean, I have thought for a long time that that the board needs to set a, I don't know, a policy or a goal or a vision of certain, I don't know what to call it, but certain goals, I guess, for lack of a better word, about areas of the island where town offices might be. So for example, years ago, maybe not even 10 years ago, the thinking was we need to revitalize downtown. So the town offices should be downtown. And there was an effort by some, which made its way into the town code, not to move town offices out of town without a town meeting vote. And that has, been, come on in. That has been, dealt with a little bit here and there and not totally followed. It's also not binding. But if we want to have but then as we're talking about town offices downtown, now we have these sea level rise projections. And so the thinking is shifting to moving the offices out of town. Sorry, cleaners are here. To moving the offices out of town so that we can avoid all the sea level stuff. But what I'm hearing is, but we want to have other things downtown that are still going to be affected by sea level rise. So I am almost thinking that we a little bit need to go building by building. There are some functions we haven't really addressed, like where would the sheriff's office go if we're going to be redoing the 20 South Water Street building. This is why I said at the beginning, this is going to take more than one workshop. We are not going to decide this right now. Most recently, the board had said the main core, I guess, municipal offices should go to 2 Fairgrounds Road in a building that is like what some of you have said, perhaps a basement that is going to increase the cost, having a 2-story basement. Or we even had talked at one point about underground parking, which is another very significant cost. But regardless of that, everybody would be together there. It would be easy to get to. Maybe there will be some sort of traffic increase. And then downtown, some of the things that were talked about, like courts need more space. The RMV needs more space. Visitor services needs more space. We need more meeting space. Should some of those things be downtown if we're talking about sea level rise, or those things are going to have to be fortified to address it? So it's hard to put all of this into one concise thought right this moment. So I think we were thinking of taking what we can glean out of the consensus of the board and put it into perhaps some kind of a outline or diagram sort of a thing, even to give back to you at some point in the near future. The DPW offices, oh, sorry. I was just going to say the DPW offices, that what I've heard is differing things from the board members. Move the offices, but are we talking moving the landfill? I heard one person, I haven't really heard anybody say move the entire landfill. Maybe Matt was going that way, but that's obviously a perhaps more than one decade project. Rob does have some maps of potentially where some idea of DPW offices could go out of town. The location right now has some complications to it. It is town owned, but it's under the jurisdiction of the airport. So there's a lot of things to sort out there. And some of it is fairly close to some residential areas. So that could be an issue as well. Julia, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, no, I was just giving you an out because I had not asked the town admin to also share a plan. So there was no orchestrated attempt by for the staff to pull something together. They really wanted to hear from the board tonight, but I know everyone always appreciates your perspective, Libby. So thanks for going through that. Let's go through each address then, and we'll see kind of what we have for the notes. There's going to be some differences. There's going to be some similarities, but this might give us a good place for town staff to begin. Melissa, I see a hand, and then Jason also waving. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Libby, for that sort of review of thoughts and challenges. And I just want to be clear, is there a current policy that, or that we have to have a town meeting vote to move town offices out of town? Is that a restriction that's in place, or was that just sort of a philosophical concept?
It's actually a bylaw.
Okay.
And however, we have moved town offices out of town without doing that consciously.
So that, I think it's just important to note though for this, that is something that we need to be transparent with the public about, and may even be something that we consider changing if that becomes a thrust of what we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, Jason?
Yeah, I was just curious, Libby, you and your leadership team and all your department heads, is there a general feeling that you would be able to run this town and the operations if you were all in the same place? Or does it really not matter? With COVID, maybe it's changed those ideas. I don't know.
Well, I think certainly we would want to all be in the same place. I think things generally work better. You visit people's offices and there's not so much traffic, and you do learn a lot by walking around a building and looking in on people. So is it absolutely critical? Some people would say yes. Some people would say, eh. With COVID, we've done a lot of Zoom stuff and it's working. It's not working great. It's not working as well as it would if we were in person. So eventually we'll be back in person, and it would be better to be consolidated, is my opinion.
Great. Okay.
Can I just add one thing, or maybe a clarification point? I agree with Libby and everything, that consolidating, or at least having the departments are closer. We don't necessarily feel it as much now during this time of year, but in the summer it is hard going from different locations, or when meetings were in person back and forth, and not having the departments near each other. So wherever that is, it would certainly, I think for me, be a lot easier, my personal opinion. I just wanted to comment in the different locations that I know Julia said you guys are going to do the summary in a bit. There was a little bit of discussion about the Easton Street and East Chestnut and what else to do with 131. But in that, I didn't really hear where the thoughts were from the board, where those current departments that are in those locations would go. So Health and Human Services and Natural Resources. So that's something else I didn't really hear about, where exactly they would then be located with the different use of those locations.
Yeah, I think some people were explicit about that and others weren't. I think some people said all of that goes to 2 fairgrounds. Some people thought Board of Health maybe goes with public safety. So I think there's, again, we'll hit each one. What we want to make sure in the notes is that each of the functions that have been identified at the current locations, that we do have it pinned for somewhere. So we don't, oh, what do you mean? We don't have a space for the Board of Health. Whoops. So yeah, we've got to. Thank you. Anything else before we go to the location by location? Okay, 16 Broad. So the left-hand side kind of has what we have there now, and then the themes were to definitely kind of keep the clerk there, the Register of Deeds, R&V, and the courts. Not town admin or HR. Yeah, so they would say town admin, HR, and housing would leave, and sustainability and all those other things. So basically those are the only things that would stay. They, you could just say all else, I think, really. The only distinction would be, I think, for 16 Broad, Matt, you had visitor services and a town retail store. being potentially at 16 Broad. Is that correct?
Well, I'm thinking of that as all one block. When I was thinking of, you know,
Okay,
Chestnut and Broad all is all being attached.
okay.
Plans have shown that.
Jason kind of talked about that too, that those 4 addresses, the first 4 on the list, that's just one big block. Okay. All right.
I'm unsure as to whether or not I should interject, but that's another point that probably needs some consensus. Are those things going to be attached and stay where they are? Because one plan that is currently under discussion is to remove the building that the health department is in right now and turn that into a bike park area. And would the thinking then be, if people are saying these are a block, are we saying they're going to be attached physically by renovation, or are they just going to stay where they are and house whatever?
I see Don's hand up.
Speaking as someone who worked in that building almost a decade ago now, that building needs to go away, the health department building. But there could be something that you may want to do in addition to visitor services. I think there could be some improvements done to that as part of this overall plan, or maybe something that's more, maybe chamber combines with visitors, maybe there's a cultural center component that comes into play. So I'm picturing it as a block, but not necessarily with all of its current structures.
Okay. So I think we should make a slide that has, I'm going to call it the downtown block, unless you tell me it already has a name. And it would basically be these first 4 addresses: 16 Broad, 20 South Water, 3 East Chestnut, and 25 Federal Street. That kind of creates that whole small block. And we need to have some discussion about that. Melissa, I see a hand.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that I don't know that in these conversations we are going to get to whether that should be of an entire block, or if we're referencing as buildings that are similarly grouped together. I think that would come further when we start to say, okay, here's what we want to be contained within this area. And then, we'd be working with architects or whatever to strategize what needs to be renovated or left. And I think that those buildings, the NERDA, the health department, and visitor services could all be taken down, and that you would open up the opportunity to redesign that area. And this is dreaming, so this is what planning is about, is dreaming, but you would open up the opportunity to redesign that area to function much more efficiently than it currently does, rather than cobbling things together through renovation. But I feel like we're not going to get there in even 1 or 2 sessions. I think we can determine what we think is a priority to be contained in that area. And then, greater minds than probably any of ours would help us design that space.
Yeah, and it all kind of hinges on, okay, we're going to move the majority of town admin functions, I'll just say, to fairgrounds. And then how do we reimagine this whole space? And it's a 2-step process, not to get us to a brand new building, but to get the administrative offices combined. And then how do we reuse this block of real estate, keeping these key functions in that proximity? Okay. Let's see. So are we good on 16 Broad then? And then we've got this downtown block kind of slide I think we created. Yeah, just go ahead and put it up there. Well, maybe not. Let's go through these things. Then we'll come back to it. Sorry, I'm looking over her shoulder to see what it looks like. Go ahead to the next address. So 20 South Water. So this is one where the sheriff and NERDA are there now, and I think we heard a couple of divergent ideas, and so this may be one that we need to really think about, or perhaps we think about it in the context of the block. But a couple of you have some pretty specific vision for visitor services, perhaps the chamber and some community spaces, and others are kind of seeing those functions that are there now.
It's Melissa. I've got to keep my video off for a few minutes, but I just want to say that, in terms of what should be there in terms of public safety, obviously if our public safety offices think and recommend that there should be space for police and fire presence, and that should take priority. And my assumption in some of my ideas has been based on the fact that they've moved out of town. So, could that space be reimagined? And I would need to hear, from them if it's important to reestablish a presence back downtown. Because obviously, if that is, that trumps a lot of other things for me.
Okay, thank you. Others on this site? Libby, yeah, Jason.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Libby, but originally where IT is, the sheriff's office was going to go there, and then it was maybe going to be RMV, or maybe that was reversed, and it was IT. So now I'm thinking, if the sheriff's office is going to move, can it be where IT is now? Should it be in the two fairgrounds? Like that kind of stuff would be whatever, Chief Pittman and sheriff's office, whatever is best. But so I think that's maybe movable, and IT's another moving piece. NERDA is only 2 people. It could probably be able to be, moved around somewhere downtown versus something more difficult to move like town clerk or visitor services.
Okay.
Chief Pittman had his hand up.
Chief?
Yeah, I think just so that you know the history of that, originally when this building out here at Two Fairgrounds was designed, the excuse me, the sheriff was supposed to go down where the current IT is, and then it was going to be the registry, but neither one, the sheriff didn't go because he didn't want to go. Then he made the argument, and I think it's rightly so, that they need to be where the courthouse is because their daily interactions are with the courthouse. And that would add a substantial amount of complexity to what they have to do, and moving prisoners back and forth all the way from town to here continually all day during court would be a problem. Then the RMV was supposed to go here, but they didn't want to pay for the space. So they didn't get the space, and then that's ultimately IT was put here. The benefit of IT being here, although it's a little bit small for their needs, is the town server is here in this building in a secure area that's protected from all kinds of hazards and stuff. So to move them elsewhere would create a certain level of complexity for them as well. Added complexity. As far as the presence for law enforcement downtown, for ever since we came here, there's been a discussion about having an officer stationed downtown in an office, which is an absolute waste of an officer. Nobody comes down there to ask for the police. But what we do have down there is we have an office that's used by the downtown police officer, Jerry Mack, Sergeant or Officer Mack, who works in and out of there on a daily basis. That we would want to continue no matter what the configuration is down at that 16 Broad Street campus, because it is important to have at least that point of presence, that office space there, and out of that space, the downtown parking enforcement people could also work.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Any other questions then about this? So, all right, we'll go to the next slide. All right, so this is Don's favorite building from long ago, is that right? Tear it down. So I think Christy was the only one who was, Christy mentioned 4 fairgrounds, and Dawn mentioned moving it to 2 fairgrounds in the new, kind of in the new building. I think there was some energy around moving everything out, but one person did mention putting public health with, putting the Board of Health with the public safety. So other thoughts on 3 East Chestnut and those functions? Move it out is okay with everybody. Move it out and tear it down. Okay. All right, then we'll go ahead and go to the next one. 25 Federal Street. So culture and tourism, this function stays on that block clearly. And the question is, do we add on to what they have now? Does it move to another facility? You know, what is this space? What does this site look like when other space is freed up, I think? Any questions, or did I catch it right? Yep. All right, next slide. So then I think this next slide is the block. And so I think we can flush this slide out, kind of what we think we've heard you all say stays downtown. And I don't know if it takes down some of the buildings, it's also potentially connects some of the buildings, but kind of develop a master plan for that site in the context of the functions that you want to have there. And potentially public safety needs if they need to be taken into consideration. Okay, so that covers that block. So then I think when we go to the next slide, which is 34 Washington Street, the harbor master, I don't think that you were saying 39 remove, right, Don, not 34? The harbor master, this site.
No, not 34. That's getting rebuilt.
Yep. So this is just going to be, I think everyone's on board. The harbor master function stays at this location. Is that correct? Yes, she stays. Okay, that's all. I think we're good there. And a couple of you have mentioned potentially on the next site's parking. So move from Matt's comment. Yeah. Okay. So then we go to 37 Washington. And this is where essentially most of you have said all of these functions that are there will go to 2 fairgrounds. And even just if it's 2 fairgrounds as the kind of long-term space, everyone agrees finance needs to be with HR and admin. So then the question becomes, do we potentially, again, it's like, okay, once we move the functions out, what's the best use of this site? Some of you imagine more parking or a parklet, and others wonder if it's worth, is it worth it, or is there another use for the building? So that would be a question that what I think Melissa's term would have to be answered by potentially by people smarter than us as you're looking at how to reuse the space. Does that make sense? So it's kind of we all agree, move it, and then we'll figure out what to do with the property. Okay.
But
So
real
next.
quick comment, that this may be the place where when 2 fairgrounds is built, this might be the space that houses some of the things coming out of East Chestnut, et cetera, while East Chestnut's being done.
Gotcha. So it could be your swing space for a while. Yeah,
This could be swing space. The offices that are there, we've put a lot of effort and money into them. That could be swing space while we're doing the next set.
a great point, Pat. Thank you. All right, so 2 fairgrounds. There are the things that are there now, and essentially, I think all of you have imagined that this is the site for a new substantial building that would house the majority of the town's administrative and offices. And so questions about, whether IT moves from 4 to 2, not as important as this concept of building this building, lasting building, significant architecture, a focal point. Anybody disagree with that?
I would just add for a future office, the sustainability office would probably be here as well.
Sustainability, housing, everything, DEI, everything goes there. Okay, thank you. Anything that's currently at 16 Broad. Yep.
And long term, I assume that IT is going to move too, you know, and that's probably why we wouldn't put a lot on the first floor there. So, but that's sort of looking out 30 years, 20 years.
Okay. So 4 Fairgrounds is next. It's your public safety building. There's really not much to talk about here. There, you know, whether IT stays or goes is not hugely significant. And this is where you have your public safety functions right now, as well as that community room. So 131 Pleasant Street. So this is one where you all have said, this is not a place to have town office functions. So when we pick up our conversations about housing or community amenities, we'll pick up on some of these uses, but you agree that this is not a place for offices? Yes? Okay.
Well,
Jason.
except for temporarily. This is a good
Temporary.
flex space, like, which is what's happening right now.
That's what I was going to say, Julia, was long-term.
Long-term, but yeah, but for now, it's okay. Yeah, it's not that it's inappropriate, it's just not part of the long-term vision. Perfect. All right, and then we talked about 2 Bathing Beach moving natural resources out to 2 Fairgrounds. So that's what's, you know, at 2, you know, there now. And we would move it. And then it could be other uses, a concession or whatever. Again, that would come in a future conversation, but the key is we know natural resources, that Concom, they're gonna move. Okay.
Back to Pleasant real quick.
Yes,
There are
sure.
no functions there now. There are plans to put functions in, but there are no functions on the
Okay.
Pleasant Street property now.
Gotcha. Coming soon. Thank you.
Yeah, so if we didn't want to spend 250,000 or whatever it's going to be, we could use that elsewhere.
Okay. The Easton Street, that stays the way it is. Everyone said that. 188 Matticat. So I think we heard so Don said everything stays, and others talk about moving the operations to the airport, and maybe one person mentioned potentially moving the landfill. Is that accurate?
I mentioned, it's Matt again, I mentioned the landfill. I think long-term, we have an issue burying everything in the wetlands. And so I think that, you know, we are now trying to decide how are we going to move forward with our landfill. And I think we should be thinking about, you know, sort of how do we do that with a 50 or 100-year vision, not with a 10 or 20.
Okay. Yeah, Dawn.
I actually said that there has been talk about trying to do something like a transfer station at the airport, but that's kind of a much bigger conversation that's being had in a different forum. So
Okay.
we can certainly talk about it, but
It's Melissa, and I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand, but I think that, you know, it might be nice for the purposes of this conversation to separate out the facilities and office space and shop space from the landfill conversation there and make them 2 distinctly different things that we're talking about. Lumping them together, I think, might be confusing.
Okay. All right. And so, Don, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just want to make sure we're accurate. Are you in favor or thinking about or moving the operations to a different site, or are you imagining that they stay?
I'm open to it, moving some of the trucks and things to a different location that might be more convenient. But I think moving the actual landfill in its current form is kind of impossible, but we're talking about more creative ways to manage our garbage.
Yeah, I meant the, just like Melissa was talking about, okay, let's talk about our offices and functions.
Yeah,
So the
okay.
operations and the landfill. So on the operations side.
I think it wouldn't be bad for some of the administrative offices to be maybe a 2FG.
Okay, maybe 2FG. So change that. I think she's just talking about landfill stuff there. Okay. So some things at 2FG. Other thoughts here, or I think, again, we've got perhaps some divergent visions. Matt and Jason talked about the airport place, airport site. Libby mentioned some constraints with that and potential neighbor issues. Does anyone else want to speak to this one? Again, I don't necessarily think there's consensus here, but I don't hear anyone, no one seems to be opposed to exploring possibilities of if moving does make sense. Yeah, Jason.
I think if we don't have consensus here, that's not the worst thing, because this would be, it doesn't really stop other pieces of the puzzle to be, major moves from happening, right? This could be a phase 2. It could be, municipal offices at 2 Fairgrounds Road and the block, and how we figure those out. And then this other part in unison, we'd still talk about it, but it wouldn't hold up that major decision-making for those 2 areas.
Okay. Matt, I saw your hand.
Yeah, but this is where I think it's relevant right now is we've got, Capcom has an $18 million sort of investment there. And I just think that's, not an investment I would like to make right now. I'd like to make that investment elsewhere.
Okay. So your issue is there's money programmed to be spent and you don't necessarily want to spend it there. If you don't want to spend money on short-term solutions. Okay. So that should be taken into consideration. Do others agree? As you're in this kind of master planning stage, like is there, as you all think about your capital investments, do you have direction that you want to give on that? Or is that something you even want, Libby? Is that something you have a need for?
Can you repeat that? Capital investments on what sites?
So if there's going to be major capital investment in a facility that's not, 2 Fairgrounds where you're going to be moving to, that perhaps you would not want to spend that money short term. Matt mentioned an $18 million number from the CapCon on Mattakit, and so that's why he's concerned about what type of investment you make that's only a short term investment.
Yeah, well, it probably, yes, I don't know if it's today, but we will need some consensus on that. The deep part of our issues here are some of these facilities that we're talking about are not conducive whatsoever to efficient operations. Not only are they in poor physical condition, but it is not good for employees' morale to be working in some of these places.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe this is one that when we take this back to the staff team, that you all need to have some conversation about, what's reasonable, what's necessary, and kind of how it all fits in the long-term picture. Is that fair?
Julia, it's Melissa. I just wanted to add that I agree with Libby, and I think that one of the outcomes we should eventually get to, and I'm not sure if this is where it's headed, is a sense of short-term, long-term prioritization. And, if the idea of moving the DPW operations off-site somewhere else isn't something that we're going to be actually formulating and talking about for 10 years, then we do need to discuss capital improvements to the existing structure now. And I think a lot of that, framing some of this in that context will help us make those decisions and those prioritizations, because I see Matt's point. We don't want to necessarily spend money on facilities now that we may be moving, but I also see that if we're actually not going to be moving them for some time,
that these facilities do need improvement and investment in them now, and they've needed it for some time.
Okay. All right, and so we've got a couple, this is going to be a complicated one, and it may be one that we need to have some conversation about. I think, Jason has said, his kind of the first priority is probably 2 fairgrounds and then figuring out that downtown block. We need to make sure that this facility is functional for the people that are there, but we don't want to overinvest in it. But we need to maybe develop some consensus around what we imagine for DPW, both on the operations side as well as on the landfill side. And we even ought to consider should Rob and some of his staff, the admin functions of DPW, actually be at 2 fairgrounds in this new facility. So kind of some bigger questions around DPW, but no one is saying long-term, we want to fix everything up at 188 Matticat for Public Works. I have not heard that. Okay. Yeah, Matt, and then Melissa.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, but I think getting these facilities, if we identify the place to build the foreman's office and the shed and the gas pumps, et cetera, if we identify that, I would say this could be an early, this could be in the first phase. Rather than spend 18 million for 10 years, or 15 years and then spend it again, I would say let's identify the right place for this to go now and spend it, in the first phase of this.
Okay. So look at them really in tandem and make sure you're making the right investments now. Melissa, did I see your hand also?
You did, Julian. I agree with Matt, and I think that one of the hard things for me is, and I haven't studied the capital expenses maybe as much or as well as my other colleagues, but I think that having an understanding of what infrastructure there we're talking about, obviously aside from the landfill operationally, is needed at the DPW or for the DPW, and what options there would be to move that. That's something that, I'm not as familiar with. And I'm actually not even 100% sure, the layout of the facilities that are there. There's quite a bit. There's shop space, there's office space. So I think that it's probably worth parsing that out a little bit more before we jump into, making swift decisions about, oh, this can just go out to the airport and this can go here. Maybe other people have that information, but I don't feel like I'm equipped with that right now.
Great. Well, this is definitely one where we're going to have some additional conversation then. So we will put all these kind of caveats in addition to what's on the slide. Catherine's been also gathering some other notes. So we think we've captured this pretty well. All right. And so the last one is 1 East Creek Road, which actually kind of our island home would really be a conversation when we talk about community, what do we call it? Public amenities, so public facilities. So I know Matt did mention it today, but this was not necessarily one we wanted to delve too deeply into today. All right, so Libby, we've gone through all the addresses, and I think we've kind of big picture a plan for 2 fairgrounds, figuring out the downtown block, and also a good understanding on the front end of what we need to do with the Public Works administrative functions, how they work now at Matticat, and what might need to move where, and kind of having perhaps a broader conversation about that with the board as they understand what is contained there now and what the needs are. Does that sound like a wrap up that kind of captures from where you all are? Libby, I see, go ahead.
I think so, and I'm just going to comment that this looks very much like what the board's most recent consensus was 4 or 5 years ago when we said we were going to move almost all of these exact same offices to 2 Fairgrounds Road. And then lots of other things came up And we never put forward an appropriation, which is probably at this point on the order of $40 million at
Okay.
least.
Mhm.
And that's why it didn't move ahead, because then the Island Home came along and the senior center, and we just haven't been the DPW facility, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. So I guess it's good, actually, if this board is perhaps in a similar space that a prior board, because in some ways it just says, well, this is what makes sense for the island. This is what makes sense for our community. And so now it's about being the time that you would start putting some better plans together so you can perhaps go for an appropriation and do some of this site planning that you need to do in these three chunks, understanding that the third chunk being the Public Works 188 Mattakit has a lot of implications, both for the landfill side as well as potentially relocating some of the offices, perhaps to two fairgrounds, perhaps to property near the airport. Okay. So then there's the two other conversations that we need to prepare and schedule a time for you all to talk about are employee housing. And there's a lot of, again, kind of the shell game that we go through here. And then the public amenities. So community center, our Island Home, concessions, those things. So those will be scheduled for a future workshop. We're going to package these notes up, and Rachel and Greg and Janet are going to be working with the staff team to kind of coordinate, you know, here's what we think the next steps are for logically planning for the municipal office space going forward. Sound good? All on the same page? Yeah? Libby, do you, or anybody on the town admin side, do you need anything else from this evening's conversation with the board?
I don't think so, unless Greg, Rachel, or Janet can think of anything. That sounds like pretty much what we've talked about, and I'm just kind of worried about timing, because we're really caught up with the budget for fiscal 22 right at the moment, plus the capital, plus PFAS, plus COVID-19. So if it's okay that we might not be able to get back to this till like the beginning of the year.
The next workshops on the other two topics would be in January.
I mean, I hate to put it out that far, but there's a bandwidth issue.
Well, and it's that time of year where everyone's, it just gets tight. Yeah.
Mhm.
You take almost 3 weeks out of the year of the 6 that are left because of holidays. So
It may be helpful timing wise to know maybe where we're at with a couple of other possibilities as some other things get sorted out.
what are you thinking in terms of timing for that? And then Jason, I did see your hand, so I'll call on you next, but Don, go ahead. What are you thinking about?
Sorry, I just started talking. When am I thinking? I mean, I would say not too close to the first of the year, probably like mid-January.
Okay, so
Take
it's
that
still after the first of the year, but just not too close because you want to see some other things. Okay. That sounds
Well, I'm
good.
just thinking we'll be taking 2 weeks off and we'll probably have some more regular business to catch up on.
I see. Okay.
So like second or third week of, like maybe one the second week of January, one the third week of January. We'll have to go through our dates and your dates.
Okay, sounds good. Jason?
I was just gonna say, I don't know how we can wait till January and February to keep going with this. There's nothing's gonna be on this year's town meeting. We don't need to, put anything on this warrant. I mean, it's very important. We need to move forward, but it's not timely in the next month or so. So I was just gonna agree with Libby's, timeframe.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, those are our key takeaways from tonight. Thanks for having us join you. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And I will say I'm done, but I'm going to give it back to Dawn to do whatever you do at the end of a meeting.
I guess I just need a motion to adjourn unless anybody else wants to jump in and say any final comments.
Yeah, Don, I think Libby's right. Like this, she and town admin and departments have been down this road with previous select board members or previous boards. But what we didn't have before was a strategic plan that's really allowed us to, you know, not lose our focus because boards change, right? In 5 years could be a completely different board. But if this is in place and we're heading this direction, there's maybe more of a chance for some version, as close as we come up with, of actually happening. So I think we're in a, it is a little bit of deja vu. You know, I'm sure Libby and Greg are like, yep, been here, done that before. But maybe there's more of a chance because we've had some strategic plans and we've had some benefits from those. So I'm hopeful.
Well, I think it's a positive thing that a lot of the same points keep coming up and you haven't had a total like shift in the thinking of the boards and in the administration.
Good.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Garantella.
Aye.
Is Melissa gone? Okay. Don Holgate, aye. See you all tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.